tutti abbiamo bisogno di qualcuno che ci abbracci.
È la persona la cosa più importante.
Accade che a un certo punto ti senti a casa.
Un luogo dove si possa vivere.
Noi siamo una famiglia,
Loro ci sono per noi.
Perché l'aspettavano così?
Perché credo in quello che dico.
Questo e basta?
Sì.
Don Giussani ha generato un popolo e io faccio parte di questo popolo.
L'avvenimento in cui Dio entra nella nostra esistenza e tutti, colpiti da una curiosità, sospendono per un istante l'ora e guardano dalla parte da cui viene il grido.
La civiltà dell'amore, fratelli e sorelle, costruite senza stancarvi mai questa civiltà. Lavorate per questo, pregate per questo, soffrite per questo.
Buonasera.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome. Welcome to this evening, which is a kind of a journey in the Holy Land, which from a different perspective from what we are used. We know that there is this conflict that has been going on for 70 years, a lot of violence. We all read the newspaper, there's been another war in Gaza, and a lot of violence that we are used to read on the first pages of the newspapers. But this evening we want to focus on those people that, despite not being on the first page of the newspapers every day, they witness the possibility to live together with the possibility to have a dialogue between parties that struggle to meet each other and to talk to each other. And we will do that from a particular perspective, from the healthcare point of view between Israeli people and Arabic people and Palestinian people. We know that the Israeli healthcare system is very modern. We saw that also during the pandemic period, but not everybody knows that 46% of the people working in the Israeli hospitals is coming from the Arabic culture. So let me also add what an important writer used to say, that is to say, integration would have happened within the hospital field, because in the hospital, that's a place of pain, of intimacy, and there are today Arabic and Jewish doctors treating patients together. So let me thank, first of all, Dr. Salem Billan. So thanks for being here with us. 51 years old, Arabic Christian, working in the head of the oncology ward at the Holy Family Hospital in Nazareth. And Dr. Billan believes that the most important thing he did in his career was been to create the first department of radiation therapy in a hospital of Jerusalem West, which is the only hospital where Palestinian patients can go despite living in the West Bank. And the second guest comes again from the healthcare field. She is a Comboni Missionary professional nurse, and she is Sister Azezet Kidane. And let me say that I've been amazed by the fact of seeing how she works in a very free way, let's say, in all kinds of contexts. So where someone needs to be supported and helped, we find Sister Azezet. We find her in the Jordan Valley between Bedouins, or taking care of people and men and women who are migrants at the heart of Tel Aviv. And exactly in that area, in that city, Sister Azezet started her mission 12 years ago. So 2010 in Israel, there was a continuous stream of migrants arriving in very poor and very bad conditions, having been tortured and raped as well. So let's have a look at a short video of a reportage which was taken by CNN during those years. It's in English, there are strong images, but it's important to see the dramatic situation she had to deal with.
Sinai, the lawless desert region along Egypt's border with Israel. Would-be African migrants who try to get through Sinai to a better life in Israel are often held captive and abused by Bedouin gangs. Some are murdered, others only released after their families pay thousands of dollars in ransom. Many of the women are raped, and some become pregnant. Tegisti Tekla is one of them. I met her in Tel Aviv. They are cruel people, she says, criminal people, and they don't have the human sense like us. I was screaming, I'm a virgin, but they don't care about you at all. Tegisti is one of the few women willing to talk publicly about her ordeal. Tegisti's rapist made her pregnant, and after she made it to Israel, she had an abortion. I would suffer all my life because I would have had a son or a daughter without a father, she says. That's why I decided not to have the baby. There are hundreds of cases like Tegisti's. Some women who become pregnant from rape give birth while in the captivity of people smugglers. A human rights group provided us with this picture of then 5-month-old Cecilia, born inside a Bedouin torture camp. After she was released, her mother told the organization that the trafficker who fathered Cecilia tortured the child, inflicting burns that reached her skull bone to pressure relatives into paying a ransom. Cecilia's wounds were finally treated in a hospital in Egypt. While in Sinai, I met Sheikh Mohammed Abu Bilal, a powerful tribal leader who has started to fight back against the human traffickers. Mohammed set up a safe house for refugees who flee the torture camps and says he frequently finds women who were raped, became pregnant, and were still tortured by the smugglers. There are usually signs of torture and rape, he says. They arrive in bad condition, dressed in rags and starved. These are all methods of oppression to exploit them for money. I get get them doctors, and I try to help. Many African refugees who make it to Israel wind up here, in Levinsky Park in Tel Aviv.
Ecco, Sora Azezet, abbiamo visto in una delle...
So we saw you, Sister Azezet, hugging one of these women being tortured and raped, being victim of this violence, not having been able to have this child. You met a lot of these women, and during those years you were the only one able to speak their language of these people coming, escaping from Sudan. So you were the only one able to translate and help them with more than 1,600 interviews, being able to rebuild and reconstruct this human trafficking, terrible human trafficking. And in 2013, Israel built a wall on that area of the Sinai, and the emergency actually finished, but the people who still suffered from those pains in their body and in their heart as well are still suffering. So you are still working there, you are still assisting these people together with a psychologist there, so still taking care of these women and their children as well, because many of these raped women also had children. So can you share with us what was your impact with this terrible situation, with this hell that you had to deal with? Thank you, Sandra. First of all, I did not believe that any person, any human being would have been able to do what I saw and what I heard. It's useless to explain that in details. You just saw it. When there are these people coming, being victims of torture, not knowing, not recognizing themselves, I couldn't believe that a human being could do something like that to another human being. But considering that this was repeated by men, by women, to children as well, I had to believe. And after that, I realized I had to talk about that in order to witness and to speak and to talk about this situation. So I decided, being aware of what could have happened to me, and I decided to speak, to talk, to share this situation. Especially, I'm thinking about a woman that with her friend escaped. They ran away from a terrible situation, and when they arrived in Sudan, they had been captured, both of them. They were 17 years old, and they were brought to Sinai. They've been tortured, raped, and one of them died. And the friend who died had been tied for 3 days with her friend who was still alive. So you can imagine the pain of this young woman telling me this situation. So I thought, either I speak and I tell this situation to other people, or I have to run away from here. And she told me, when Israeli soldiers brought me into this kind of house and this building, she said there was a mirror, and she said, I didn't recognize myself in front of the mirror. And since that very moment, that person can no longer look at her at the mirror, because this reminds her of what she lived, of what she saw. And there are many, many people who suffered in order to pay to these people, to these smugglers, huge amounts of money. And we are talking about very poor people. And I'm just thinking about people that had to suffer for 1 month, 3 months, 5 months, 1 year in order to get all this money. There have been people that paid $3,500, but there have been people that paid $50,000, and that left into these people a very terrible sign that cannot be treated, because this made their poor families being victims of violence as well. So there have been 7,000 people who died because of tortures. And what is really said here is that nobody was talking, nobody said anything at that time when Africans were in the desert, in the Sinai, with the tortures. They captured Chinese, and they captured Chinese people. All the world was talking about that. When they captured, I think, 5 Americans, all the world was telling this story. But with all those Africans really suffering from those tortures, and everybody there was aware of that, because still today in Libya there is this situation. Nobody is talking about that, and I'm pretty sure you don't even know this situation is still present there. So I decided I couldn't avoid to tell this situation, to spread this information. And when Alessandra invited me and they sent me this message, passion for the person, well, this really hit me, because really, if each one of us doesn't see in the other person a real passion, the love of God, we risk to reach that point of many other people achieved, which is being ready to torture and to perpetrate those violences against other human beings. Well, Sister Azezet, after so many years, there are still those scars that are still there in these people. Well, with Doctors for Human Rights, I started making these interviews to these people, and doctors were not understanding, and there were those scars, and doctors couldn't understand what happened to those people. So I started interviewing them, and we used to send them in a specific center in order to give birth to their child. And I started to go there, into this center. And after 12 years, I had that hope. So there was this hope of these peoples that suffered a lot, but they were hoping that being in the Holy Land, that pain would have finished. But once this situation was finished, there was, I remember, a mother with her daughter. What could those mothers tell their daughters that will never know their father, that they've been the result of the rape of their mother, and also the mothers that didn't give birth to a child because of abortion? They still have to deal with that question, what would have happened if? I remember once I saw there was a mother that told me all her pain, all the violences she had to deal with. And when I work with my colleague, with the psychologist there, we are aware that we cannot leave those women alone because the scars are still there in those women. They need to be helped, to be supported. We need to work in order to give them freedom and to help them. And for 12 years, we have been working for that. I'm telling you that the bad things of this situation, but from this center, we also had very good, we also met very good, marvelous people. A woman that had been raped, and then she got married with a perpetrator of this violence coming from Israel. She went then to a center to be helped, and then she became a prostitute. She really hated herself, asking herself, why am I living in this world? So she started coming to our center with her children, and that woman became a protagonist there. She started talking about the tortures and telling what happened to her, how she became free. Now she's in Canada. We are in Israel, and we have an organization which is called Kuchinate, and she opened in Canada, Kuchinate Canada, and we are proud of her because she became a model for those women that can think to their future, that are aware, that should be aware that they can do something. This passion from the person to the person, this really gives hope. So thanks to the help of our Lord, we have been able to actually give her a freedom, and she became protagonist of her own life for her sister and her brothers. And now she's talking about her situation without any shame. She knows she has to be brave for herself, for her children, and for the others as well.
Ecco, Soraya.
So, Sister Azezet, twice a week you continue going to Tel Aviv, but the reason why you went to the Holy Land was to work with the Bedouins. That's yet another reality that is not often discussed, and they are the poorest among the poorest in the Holy Land. They live in barracks in the desert, and they are constantly at risk to be sent away from these barracks. You always say that if you want to meet them, if you want to truly meet them, you have to seal their heart. What do you mean by this expression? When Ali and Sister Alicia Vacas-Moro and I, when we were sent to work with the Bedouins, we found human rights rabbis helping us and introducing us to the Bedouins. And so we went and visited them in their barracks. We thought that they would tell us there's no water, there's no light, we need food. But in fact, they told us that in order for our children to have a future, we want education. Yes, education. And we didn't know how to start in providing them with education, because where they live, it's impossible to build anything. So we said, okay, no problem. And they said, basically, no problem, you can educate our children in our barracks. And so we started establishing kindergarten in their barracks. When we started in one community, there was yet another community placing their barracks at our disposal for us to open a kindergarten. And so we started a kindergarten in any community. And then we kind of extended the field of our activities. We started doing promotion for women, for example, with education for women as hairdressers or nurses or children educators. We taught them how to take care of children. We did tailoring classes. And it was beautiful to see that they were able to get out of themselves, also to help their peers. I mean, it was the very same dynamics that we saw outside. I mean, apparently these women looked very close, but in fact they weren't. They were very open. There was once a woman who was not married, and the Bedouins well, actually only had men from one community to go and buy to Jericho or in other areas or in Bethany. And actually they said, this woman once told us that she wanted to learn how to drive a car, to drive the women to do the shopping. And so she learned how to drive a car, and she started driving the other women to the market. And to me, it was fantastic. It was a great joy, because this wish to help her peer women came from herself. So for me, these women taught many things to me. They taught me hospitality, love for the other human being, and also the human rights rabbis introduced us to people who is respectful, who is suffering, but at the same time who is capable of envisaging the future of their children. One day there was a Bedouin who would drive me from one camp to the other, and he talked about the walls, and he actually said to me, you know, these walls are not only walls for us, but they're walls also for the others. They do not know us, and we do not know them. We do not know their face, but they do not know our face. So the fear of the other, the fear of the unknown, becomes bigger and bigger, in spite of the acknowledgement that experiencing the other can be something graceful. When I went to Israel, I used to pray the Virgin and Jesus for peace. But for many years, I haven't prayed for peace, but I have prayed for peaceful coexistence. Because when we meet one with the other, we can stretch our hands and shake hands with the other and recognize the image of God in the face of the other. The other person may be different in culture, in faith, in color, but still we're meeting a human being. So we have to have this passion for the person in recognizing Jesus. There's God in the other person. And unless we recognize this, we cannot pray for peace, because peace requires an encounter.
Ecco, un incontro che...
So an encounter that takes place also in other ways. Our guest was explaining before that she started her work in Tel Aviv with African migrants in Tel Aviv. And every week, actually, this group of African human rights rabbis go and treat the Palestinians in the territories. And you always say that this is probably one of the very few possibilities of having a physical encounter between the Palestinians on one side of the wall and the Israelis on the other side of the wall. Yes, that's true. This movement started over 35 years ago. There was back then a small group, but now the group includes over 1,500 doctors, and every Saturday about 20 doctors go to the other side of the wall. They jump over the wall to reach the other. And to me, this is a great example. Most of the times I am the only Christian, because they are Jewish and Muslims. But this meeting, this encounter, can help heal many scourges. So we go on Saturdays, we hear lots of people. The most important thing that we do is to listen to the other people. We listen to these people's problems. And I also have some practical experiences. For example, the experience of a doctor who lost his brother or his sister, some of his beloved ones, because they had gone to the other community, the Palestinians, for example. And sometimes they would meet the mothers or the fathers or or people whose relatives had been killed by the Israelis. And so when you see these people sitting together at a table, at the same table, and only in that moment do they realize that that their pain is the same pain, basically. And this is something that comes only from God. This is something that I do not term reconciliation, but this is the encounter of the person with the person, the human being with the other human being. And this situation, this way of living should not go on, because everybody suffers and everybody dies. So both parties suffer and cry, and both parties try to come closer one with the other. So the meetings, the encounters we have on Saturdays are very touching for me. And it touches, these meetings touch me more than when I go to Mass, when I go to church, especially when you meet, for example, a woman who lost her child. So this is something that we need. We need to bring an end, to bring this suffering to an end, but together. So there are Israelis who are now peace combatants. So Israelis who experience lots of suffering, and Palestinians who, for example, had gone to prison, but now they've joined forces. They are together, and they have to fight for coexistence. And so they founded an organization to help their peoples. This is a drop in the ocean, but this drop exists, even if it is not well known, and we really hope that it becomes bigger and bigger. Thank you.
Adesso allora andiamo, facciamo un viaggio.
So let us now take a virtual tour to Jerusalem. We would like you to meet another friend of Azezet. She is a doctor. She is a gynecologist and works in the hospitals of Jerusalem. And she was the very first Arab woman to be the president of the human rights doctors. And together with Sister Aziza, she goes to the villages in to treat patients. So let's now listen to the experience of this woman. I think that clinics should be an example to create more meetings between the two parties, to have, if not peace, at least coexistence, and above all, mutual knowledge. Because one of the problems of this conflict is that the two parties don't know each other. They never meet. Even here in Jerusalem, there's a Jewish and a Palestinian part of the population, but each one of them lives in its own environment without any involvement with that of the other side. I grew up with the awareness that I should have worked harder, that I should have had to work harder than the others to achieve my goals. And that happened thanks to my mother. She was alone. She never went to school, nor was she able to read or write. But she made sure that my brothers and I got an education and that we finished at least high school in Israeli schools. On the one hand, she wanted a good education for us. On the other hand, she feared the challenges that we would have had to face as Arabs in a Jewish environment. She did not want us to be involved in the political dynamics of the conflict. I grew up without being aware of what the Israeli-Palestinian conflict was. I realized this later when I started studying at university and I began volunteering for human rights doctors. It's always been a special moment for me to go one Saturday per month with the mobile clinic on Women's Day. I believe in justice and equal rights, such as the right to health for those living in the occupied territories or in Israel as refugee or as an asylum seeker. The experience as a volunteer doctor is like an island of mental health for me, because it represents an opportunity for both sides to meet on an equal basis and not as occupiers or occupied. We work with the mobile clinics as people who want to help other people, because we realize that there is a common ground, a common human ground, whether you are an Israeli or a Palestinian. So when I come to the clinic as a gynecologist and I have a woman in front of me, I have a woman, no matter if she's a Palestinian, a laik, or an ultra-Orthodox Jew. Of course, I'm trying to help everybody. I try to pay attention to the cultural background, and I offer adequate treatments considering also the context from which these people come from. I think that what in a conflict context like ours we are mainly missing is compassion. There is no compassion for the other side. People don't have the desire to know the others. They don't think that they're dealing with human beings with their loads of pain and difficulties. So we lack compassion. And that should be something characterizing the experience of any doctor. Mojira was also saying that Israeli hospitals, Israeli clinics, she also works in an Israeli hospital like you, and these hospitals should be precisely the place of this encounter. As I was saying at the beginning, almost half of the health staff is of Arab origin. You've been working in Haifa for 26 years, in a hospital, and you have lots of Arab people. So my first question to you is very simple. You are part of the 20% of Israeli Arab people, so Arabs with an Israeli passport, so Israeli citizens. Why are there so many Israeli Arab people who decide to become a health professional, become nurses or doctors, as you did? Well, first of all, thank you very much for your kind invitation. I'm really very happy to see that even if it is so late, there are so many people attending this session. So again, thanks for being here and thanks for inviting me. So, first of all, working as members of the health staff makes it possible for Arab people to have a career and to have a high quality of life. And it also enables us to be an integral part of the Israeli society. We are fully entitled members of that community, and the only profession that enables us to have this is the health profession. We know that high-tech and cybersecurity are two core businesses for Israel, and we as Arab people find it very, very difficult to have a profession in these two fields. While the medical profession enables us to work, and another reason is also the fact that being a doctor is an element, a reason for pride for the family, especially for the Arab people who live in the periphery of Israel. And 30% of these Arab people that makes up for 20% of Israel does not speak Yiddish. And therefore, they cannot take the right treatment. And so there are many Arab doctors and who can prescribe drugs. It's not easy to work as doctors in Israel. There's a limited number of posts. Only a few Arab people can access those positions. Many other Arab people travel outside Israel. So that's the reason. The main reason is to have a career enabling you to have a life with a socio-economic high stages. So you work within the Israeli health system, and you've often said to me as well that the most important thing you've realized so far in your career was to set up the first oncology center and the first radiotherapy center in the occupied territories and in Gaza. That's the only one that the Palestinian living in these areas can access. Why is this so important? And can you also tell us a bit about this project that was also described in the journal Lancet, one of the major scientific journals? And the fact that this was reported in Lancet testifies to the authoritativeness of what you are doing. This is my life project. I am a Christian Arab, and I also have a conflict within Israel and also outside Israel. We know that the Palestinians who live in the Holy Land are divided with a wall, by a wall. The ones who live on the other side of the wall in Gaza and in the West Bank have a catastrophic health situation. There are many people who are not treated. On the 1st of June 2006, the general director of Victoria Hospital, based in East Jerusalem, serving the patients coming from the West Bank and from Gaza, and he looked for me and had a proposal for me. He was aware of this catastrophic situation, especially among patients, especially among cancer patients who were not receiving any treatment. And he told me that he had the funds to open an oncology center. And then inside this oncology center, there is a radiotherapy unit. And back then, people were treated only if they had enough money to go to Jordan or to Egypt. And so you can easily imagine that if you are a poor cancer patient, it would be very, very difficult for you to go to Jordan or to Egypt. So as soon as I received this proposal, you have to think that I studied medicine because being a doctor is a mission for me. I want to help people. I want to help the people who are most in need. So that's a mission for me. And that can bring a lot of help to many communities. So when this was proposed to me, I immediately accepted, but I knew that this was not going to be easy. I work a lot, and I also anticipated that it could have been very difficult to work between two communities that do not collaborate and do not even communicate. That was a very, very brave project. So when I started talking about this project of my Jewish colleagues in Rambam, you have Professor Gil's Eve. He's very famous. He was the director of the Head and Shoulder Surgery Department. And all of them supported me. They really wanted to help me build up this oncology center. In the occupied territories and in West Bank, you don't have early diagnosis, you don't have early screening. Most of the times, cancer patients are terminal patients. You do not even have morphine to take. So the situation is really very, very bad. So we decided to organize the project in 3 steps. The first step consisted in going to the area and to see, actually, to do some kind of preliminary check and see what kind of patients. I come from an area in which you have screening excellence therapy. 65% of the patients are healed from cancer every year, and that is because they have everything at their disposal. A few kilometers away from the wall, or before the wall, you have another population, and basically almost everybody dies from cancer because there's no screening. So when I realized these figures, I started working every Saturday, going from Haifa to Jerusalem to see what type of patients we have to deal with. I saw terminal patients, I saw patients who coming from Gaza and who take days to go to Jerusalem. There was a woman with breast cancer who lost 2 children a couple of months ago. Another patient who borrowed money, to be visited by me. Another one was even crying because he had managed to see a doctor, to see me. So cancer patients with very large cancers, very big cancers that I had never seen in my life. So after this, then there was a second step. The second step was that we bought the linear accelerator for the radiotherapy treatment, and we decided to train personnel. I namely believe that you can do nothing without trained personnel. And so we involved the Perez Peace Center. They really helped me a lot in this to train personnel. And I'm not only talking about doctors, I'm talking about doctors, physicists, technicians, nurses. So we decided to select these people from the West Bank and Gaza and bring them to Israel, not just for 1 or 2 weeks, but for 5 years, so 4 to 5 years per doctor. So after 2 to 3 years, we had lots of physicists, lots of doctors who had worked in Israel, who specialized in Israel, who treated the Jews and spoke Yiddish, and that was really incredible. So that is why the Lancet published this story, because we did really something exceptional. And then, when these people were ready, we entered the third step. All these doctors came back to the Augusta Victoria Hospital in eastern Jerusalem. So they were more or less independent, and we basically helped them become independent. And every Saturday I would continue visiting them, supervising their work. This project has really given me a lot. And at every step, I felt that I was doing the right thing, that it was not only me who had given to them, but it was also the other way around. I have been able to grow as a doctor, and I have been able to grow as a man. I have been able to become a more secure person, a safer person. I'm not alone. There are lots of people who have worked with me, and we saved many lives. And today, we have an oncology center in Augusta, Victoria, that's the only one and one of the most famous ones, like the one in Israel, and it's capable of saving many lives. I'm really happy of the fact that we managed to do this.
Grazie mille, Salem.
So thank you very much, Salem. Now, let's have a look at the Augusta Victoria Hospital in Jerusalem, and let's also meet Professor Jill Ziv, one of the directors who helped Salem in this project, and then we will also meet Fadia Trash, a Muslim, and who was one of the very first Palestinian oncologists who were trained within the framework of this project, and who now heads the Augusta Victoria Hospital, and a few weeks ago also welcomed the US President Biden in the hospital. So let's go and meet them. So being a doctor, an Israeli, and a Jew, why did you decide to start this adventure and train Palestinian doctors? When I have been hired at Rambam Hospital to head oncology department for head and neck, I talked with the board for about 1 hour about the development plan for the department. And then at a given point, I said that we also have to remember that there's a wall separating us from the West Bank, and that behind that wall, there are people who need cancer treatment. And that will be part of my agenda for the next 10 years. Within the department, I found a wonderful partner, Dr. Salem Billan, who had the same ideas. So we did not know anything about each other, but finding us together increased the chances to achieve our goal. It's like a taboo to create the political or economic relations between the Israelis and the Palestinians. The two respective governments do not allow that. But in the field of healthcare, in particular in the field of oncology, it's possible to interact. We wanted to make sure that talented Palestinian doctors who mostly go abroad and don't come back could be trained in Israel in order to stay and help their people. So we involved Palestinian colleagues, we included Palestinian colleagues in our staffs without differences so that they would treat both Jewish and Palestinian patients. And so step by step, we built a kind of parallel universe. We left politics aside and we focused on human beings, on their right to be treated, on the things that people share and not on what divides them. When I am in front of a patient, I don't care what he has done, whether he's a civilian, a soldier, or a terrorist. I'm just dealing with a person who needs to be treated. Our job is to make sure that this person will be alive to face what he's waited for, either to get a medal or to go to jail. But when patients come to the hospital, they're all the same. The reality of hospitals is special because of the coexistence and collaboration between Jewish, Christians, and Muslims. That's why we titled our article on the journal Lancet, How to Create a Partnership Between Countries Through Healthcare, How to Connect Two Disconnected Worlds. The best moment for us was when we saw Dr. Fadi Atrash, one of our Palestinian graduates who became the CEO of the Augusta Victoria Hospital, welcoming the US President Biden a month ago. This is the first visit by an American president to Palestinian hospitals in East Jerusalem. Biden announced that the allocation of $100 million to guarantee their quality and sustainability. We have a liquidity problem. We don't have enough money to buy the drugs because of the Palestinian Authority's insolvency. They don't pay the monthly bills of patients who come to receive cancer therapies from the West Bank and from Gaza. The hospital management is not easy. It is a Palestinian hospital and all our employees are Palestinian, but in East Jerusalem we must follow the rules of the Israeli Ministry for Health. It's not an easy balance to maintain. Apart from being a doctor, you should also somehow be a politician. Where were you born and why did you decide to become a doctor? What was the path that led you to become an oncologist? I was born in a village in the north of West Bank near Tul Karem. I decided to become a doctor when I was 7 years old. I went to the university in Tunisia, and then I came back in 2005 and I started working at the Augusta Victoria. They were starting the oncology department. I had my first contacts with patients suffering from cancer and I decided to become an oncologist. Thanks to Doctor Billan, I was offered the opportunity to specialize in radiation therapy at the Rambam hospital in Haifa. That was my first experience within a completely Israeli environment, but in Haifa I did not feel like a foreigner. It's a mixed city, and many Arabs are working in the hospital. I learned Hebrew and I've been really helped by Salem, who hosted me with his family. I became part of the system. We aimed at becoming doctors dealing with the pains and the sufferings of patients with cancer. We used to talk about politics, but outside the ward. Even during the most difficult periods, such as when wars break out, communication between us, Israeli and Palestinian doctors, never fails. Healthcare is a door for dialogue between the two sides to find a way to live together. The most frustrating issue for me as a human being, as a doctor, and as a Palestinian, is to see the lack of equality. In Israel, you can find all the best therapies, and just a few miles away, there are villages that do not have access even to the most basic care. This led me to get involved, aiming at doing something to change the reality and help my people.
Both your colleagues explained how this collaboration, even the moment when a war breaks out, never fails. So we saw that last year when during the pandemic, all the Israeli media highlighted the importance to fight the common enemy, which was the virus. And then 1 month after that, the Gaza war broke out. And we saw very violent conflicts in Gaza as well, where you were based. You also see the victims of this war. So what is your experience from this point of view? Well, it's very sad. We are two completely separated people. The only place where we can talk to each other is the hospital. I have 3 kids that actually do not have friends, and despite being inside Haifa, which is a mixed city, we don't have anything, and they've been shocked when there's been the war with Gaza, and this war reached my door. This was a war within Israel, inside Israel. And this made me think about that. What shall I do now? I'm a doctor, but my family is endangered. And I have a friend of mine who's a Christian as well. He's heading the emergency, and they attacked his house. He was at the hospital treating these people that actually attacked his house. And all the things that happen outside Israel with Gaza actually is reflected inside, and we feel it. There are many Christian people that leave from Israel to go abroad, and that's a situation that, despite the fact that within the hospital we don't feel it, we cannot see that directly. We feel a situation which can explode, which can burst in every moment. We're doing our best to calm down the situation, but in my opinion, unfortunately, peace is definitely far away, and the only place where you can feel this peace is inside the hospital. Let me make a step backwards. When Trump was the president of the US, he cut all the funds that are allocated to the hospital Augusta, Victoria. All the funds had been cut. So at that point, all the Jewish Israeli professor wrote and signed a letter to President Trump asking him to reallocate those funds to the Israeli people. This was an incredible act that really touched me. The reality is very difficult. We are living an internal conflict. I don't know what my children or grandchildren will have to face in the future. We don't know what will happen in the next months. And unfortunately, we know that at present, what is against peace is what is actually winning in this moment. So I hope that this world will learn something from what there is inside the hospital. The living together and the coexistence is a real example that I hope sooner or later will be copied also outside the hospital. A very last question from a personal point of view. You are a Christian Arab. You were born in Cana of Galilee. So I think the first ones to be thanked are your family, your grandparents. Of course, I always have to thank my family. I need to thank also the Italian hospital in Haifa, where my grandparent was working as a gardener, and he used to work there for 50 years at the same hospital. I met there the cancer patients, and I decided there to become a doctor. The head of the hospital was an Italian person, and when I graduated the high school, he helped me to come to Italy and to do that, to learn this job. So I really need to thank this person and all the people that helped me. Thank you. And a very last question, a personal question to Sister Azezet. You were born in Eritrea, and there you met Father Comboni, who brought you around the world. So how did he capture your heart? I met Father Comboni with all his children. I didn't know Comboni before, and I have to thank Italy because you generated a person with a real passion for Africans. Comboni sisters used to work with people suffering, and I grew up in a place where I used to see many people suffering with a lot of pain, and I was touched by seeing that people that really deserved to be helped and supported. And when I remember when a sister shared and showed us a movie showing what these sisters were doing, my heart was captured, and I thought, this is my family. And once I met Comboni, a man full of passion who moved to Central Africa, to the center of Africa, to Sudan with all his brothers, and they all died. But he was brave. He has been brave to go there because he saw those slaves dying. He saw them suffering. And he decided to go there to help those people who were in need. Saint Daniele Comboni, more than 150 years ago, was talking about suburbs. As today, Pope Francis is talking about the same thing, and as Comboni has been doing. So Comboni went there to help there, saying that if he had 100 lives, he would have devoted all his lives for these suffering people. So he spent his life for this purpose. And this passion from Comboni really attracted me. And I really pray and hope that I will be able to spread this passion also to other people in order to find other people that will love, heal these people in the suburbs and to show them the face of God and Jesus. Thank you, Alessandra. Thanks to all of you. Thank you very much, Dr. Salem Billan and Sister Azezet. Sister Azezet, your passion for the person also goes through these NGOs that you are working with in Tel Aviv. So if you are curious, you can find also what they're doing, and you can purchase something online as well. You were quoting the Pope Francis the Pope, and we have been listening to your experiences here. And I'd like to quote a sentence from the book of the Pope, where he says that the gospel asks us not to look somewhere else because the conflict is rooted where faces are dissolving. So when the others, their face, their pain is in front of our eyes, so in those cases we cannot ignore their dignity in a violent way. We shouldn't focus on theoretical debates, but be aware of the scares and injuries of those people. So that's what Salem and Azezet are doing every day. Thank you once again. Thanks to the meeting as well for having organized this session and sharing these experiences. The meeting that, as we know, is a unique event with an extraordinary human collaboration. Civilization cannot grow without culture, and the meeting has always been a cultural framework, a cultural place, and each one of you can contribute to keep on developing this long history. You can find places where you can donate with the red heart symbol, so you can donate to the specific desks with the volunteers wearing a pink T-shirt. From this year, the meeting association is a third sector association, so you will also have tax benefits if you donate to the meeting. So wish you a good journey back to the Holy Land, and thanks again for being here with us.
Civiltà dell'amore, fratelli e sorelle, costruite senza stancarvi mai questa civiltà. Lavorate per questo, pregate per questo, soffrite per questo.
Tutti abbiamo bisogno di qualcuno che ci abbracci.
È la persona la cosa più importante.
Accade che a un certo punto ti senti a casa.
Un luogo dove si possa vivere.
Noi siamo una famiglia,
Loro ci sono per noi.
Perché l'aspettavano così?
Perché credo in quello che dico.
Questo e basta?
Sì.
Don Giussani ha generato un popolo e io faccio parte di questo popolo.
L'avvenimento in cui Dio entra nella nostra esistenza e tutti, colpiti da una curiosità, sospendono per un istante l'ora e guardano dalla parte da cui viene il grido.